Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're getting into the weeds. Literally. We're going to break down exactly how agricultural companies calculate their direct greenhouse gas emissions, looking at the standards they have to follow.
So how do you take something like 50,000 liters of diesel and turn it into just one single number for a sustainability report? Well, it might sound super complex, but it actually boils down to a really clear standardized process. And that's what we're going to do today. Walk through it step by step and really focus on the formulas that make it all happen. All right, here's the plan for today. We'll cover why this reporting matters, what Scope 1 even means, get into the nitty-gritty of the calculations, talk strategy, and then look at a specific case for fleet fuel. Let's get right into it. Okay, first things first. Why even bother with all this? Especially for companies in agriculture, what are the real stakes here? It's really not just about being green. If you're not managing your emissions, you're looking at some serious business risks. We're talking real money here. Things like higher costs for capital, pricier operations, and getting hit hard by crazy fuel prices. Not to mention, potential disruptions in your supply chain or getting caught off guard by new regulations down the line. It's a big deal. So, we've got the why down. Now, let's get super clear on the what. What exactly are we measuring? This brings us to a key concept, Scope 1 emissions. It's actually pretty straightforward. Scope 1 emissions are the greenhouse gases a company releases directly from sources it owns or controls. So think of it this way. It's the smoke coming out of your own chimney. It's the exhaust from your company-owned tractors, the fuel burned in your on-site generators. It's all the stuff you have direct, hands-on control over. And when we say greenhouse gases, the standard is incredibly specific. It's not just carbon dioxide. We're talking about these 7 distinct gases, all covered by the Kyoto Protocol. Each one has a different warming potential, a different impact on the atmosphere, so they all have to be accounted for. Okay, this is where we really get to the heart of it. Let's do the math and break down the actual formula companies use for these calculations. And there it is. Looks simple, right? But this little formula is the key to everything. Your total Scope 1 emissions are the sum of your activity data times an emission factor. Now, that big E-looking symbol is the Greek letter sigma, and in math, it just means add everything up. So what you do is you run this calculation for every single activity that produces emissions, and then you just add all the results together. That's it. So let's break down those two pieces because they're super important. Activity data, that's just the what you did part. It's a number. How many liters of fuel did you burn? How much natural gas did you use? Easy enough. Then you've got the emission factor. Now this is the magic number. It's the impact of what you did. These factors are worked out by scientists, from groups like the IPCC, and they're basically a conversion rate that turns your activity into its actual greenhouse gas footprint. It's a really neat way to separate the action from the consequence. Let's look at a real example here to see how this plays out. See the line for diesel generators? The activity data is 50,000 liters. You multiply that by the specific emission factor for diesel, which is 2.68 kilos of CO2 per liter. Boom, you get 134 tons of CO2 equivalent. And that little E for equivalent is so important because it's what lets us roll up all those different greenhouse gases into one single comparable number. Then you just do the same thing for natural gas, add them up, and you get your total. And there you have it, 694 tons of CO2 equivalent. The whole point, the really crucial thing to get here, is that you've taken all these different activities, burning diesel, using natural gas, and you've converted them into one single standardized number. That's what makes tracking over time and comparing with others even possible. Okay, so you've got your number, great. But now what? Getting the number is just step 1. The real work begins when you start building a strategy around it. Let's see what that looks like. A good reduction plan can't just be some vague promise, right? It has to be concrete. You need to define exactly what you're targeting. What percentage of your emissions? You need a timeline. What's your starting point and when do you want to hit your goal? And most importantly, how are you going to get there? Are you investing in new tech? Are you changing your processes? It all has to be spelled out. And when you're setting those goals, there's a really critical choice to make between 2 types of targets. An absolute target is pretty simple. You're just aiming to lower your total emissions, period. Think of it like going on a diet to lose 10 pounds. But an intensity target is about efficiency. It's like saying you want to reduce emissions per ton of products you create. This is huge for a growing company, right? Because it means you can still expand your business, but you're doing it in a much cleaner, more efficient way. All right, so that covers emissions from stationary sources, like generators. But what about all the trucks and tractors?
companies have to report on their vehicle fleets too, and that calculation is a little different, but just as important. So for fleets, the game is a little different. You can't just compare a liter of diesel to a liter of biodiesel directly. So the first step is to convert everything into a standard unit of energy, in this case, the gigajoule. This gives you that perfect apples-to-apples comparison. You just take the volume of fuel you used, multiply it by its specific energy content, and that gives you the total energy. And the really key thing here is to keep track of the energy from renewable sources, like that biodiesel, separate from your regular fossil fuels. And when you visualize it like this, in a donut chart, the result just pops. It's super clear, super immediate. You can see right away that in our example, 13.5% of the fleet's energy comes from renewable sources. That percentage becomes a really powerful metric for tracking how well you're doing on that journey to cleaner fuels.
And that's really the big takeaway. All these calculations, all these numbers, they're not just for some dusty report that sits on a shelf. They are powerful tools for managing the business. They connect your sustainability goals directly to the bottom line, to things like cutting costs, managing risk, and staying competitive.
Which, of course, leaves us with the biggest question of all. Now you know how to calculate the numbers, but how do you actually change them? Because measurement is just the first step. The real test, the real challenge, is turning that data into meaningful action. And that's something to think about. Thanks for watching The Explainer.